Hello, my name is Eric Chiang, and we're in the Great Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee, the starting point for the 6th edition of Around the World in 80 Hours. So this year's trip will focus on the environment and measures of standard of living that go beyond traditional GDP numbers. We begin here in the Smoky Mountains, the most visited national park in the United States. And one of the reasons is because over half of the US population lives within a day's drive, and there's no admission fee. And although residents of Tennessee pay the highest sales tax in the nation, there are clearly benefits of living in a clean environment. From here, we're going to be going to New Delhi, India, and then to the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan, and finally to Malaysia, where we will see diversity in the way people live. So let's head to the airport and board our first flight. We take off on a 2-hour flight covering 800 miles to Newark, New Jersey, where we connect to United Airlines and fly 14 hours and 8,000 miles, crossing 10 time zones and landing in New Delhi, India before the sun rises. Because we have a 5-hour layover, we'll use this time to visit a historical attraction. Well, welcome to India. We are in the capital city of New Delhi, in front of Qutb Minar, the tallest brick minaret in the world, built in 1192. And although Hinduism is the dominant religion in India, this World UNESCO Heritage Site represents the historical significance of Islam in this region. On our way back to the airport, we passed by several crowded street markets, a clear difference from the quiet life in the Smokies. But with a favorable exchange rate and a low cost of living in India, great bargains can be found. Back at the airport, we board our Druk Air flight to Bhutan. We take off and fly 2 hours and 1,000 miles deep into the Himalayas. Along the way, we catch a rare glimpse of Mount Everest, piercing its 29,000-foot peak above the clouds. Flying into Bhutan can be a scary experience as the plane makes several sharp turns around steep mountains in order to reach the runway nestled in the deep valley. In fact, there are only 11 pilots in the world certified to land at this airport, and they all work for Druk Air, a monopoly owned by Bhutan's government. Because there are only a few flights each day, airfares are very expensive, making Bhutan one of the most difficult countries to visit. Well, welcome to Bhutan. We are here in the capital city of Thimphu, a city of 100,000 people without a single traffic light. And as beautiful as this country is, it's not overrun with tourists because the government requires every tourist to spend $250 a day, but that includes your guide, your driver, your hotels, meals, and attractions. So it's an all-inclusive experience. Although average household income is very low in Bhutan, the people look healthy and happy. Bhutan is known to be one of the happiest places on earth. In 1972, the king of Bhutan declared that happiness is more important than GDP and included the Gross Happiness Index in its constitution. Healthcare and education is provided to everyone, and keeping the environment clean is a top priority. Also, there is not a single Starbucks or McDonald's in the entire country. Globalization has not yet reached Bhutan, but the people seem very content. Much like Christianity runs deep in the Appalachians, Buddhism runs deep here in the Himalayas. I am wearing a traditional Bhutanese go, and we are in front of the world's largest bronze Buddha. Beautiful monasteries are found everywhere in Bhutan, along with a vivid example of price discrimination. While locals can enter for around 15 cents, tourists must pay 20 times more. Although Bhutan places the highest emphasis on environmental conservation, there is one exception, and that is its reliance on hydropower. It's certainly cleaner than using fossil fuels, but hydropower does require extensive damming of Bhutan's many rivers. We are at the Puna Zangju hydroelectric power plant. This is the largest one in Bhutan, and hydroelectric power is Bhutan's most important industry, contributing up to half of its GDP. Much of this electricity will be exported to India. Next, we drive along primitive mountain roads that are shared with cows, and in the distance, I spot a beautiful farmhouse, which we decide to visit unannounced. And with a simple introduction by our guide, we are graciously invited inside. Kindness to strangers, especially tourists, is paramount in Bhutan because tourism funds many programs including education and healthcare. Inside, the mother of the house prepares a traditional butter tea called suja and offers me the first cup. After having tea, I venture out into the fields and notice the lack of tractors and other heavy farm equipment. Also, no pesticides or chemicals are to be found, as Bhutanese farmers use traditional methods to cultivate and harvest their crops. While this may not be the most efficient, everything that is grown in Bhutan is organic, which means the food is fresh and delicious. For dinner, we are invited to another family's home to enjoy unique dishes prepared using a traditional wood stove, including momos, which are a type of dumpling, an abundance of vegetables, but very little meat. Because Bhutan is a strict Buddhist country, animals are never slaughtered for food, and therefore all meats must be imported. We start early the next morning on our quest to visit the tiger's nest perched on a steep mountain cliff. To get there, we follow the monks on an arduous all-day hike up the mountain. The Tiger's Nest is Bhutan's most famous monastery, first built in the late 17th century. Along the way, we see tea houses, staggering peaks, and waterfalls until eventually the majestic Tiger's Nest comes into view. Almost there. Almost to the top. So here we are at perfect viewpoint of the Tiger's Nest. You can see it right behind me. It's such an incredible sight. Now from this point, we have to walk all the way down the valley there, probably like 500 feet or so, and then back up 500 steps to get to the minor monastery. So it's going to be very exciting to see. We finally made it to the top. We are at the Tiger's Nest Monastery. This has definitely been one of the highlights of the entire trip, but our stay in Bhutan has come to a close. It's time to head to the airport to catch our flight to Singapore. We take off on another Druk Air flight on a very steep ascent to avoid the mountains and fly 4 hours and 2,000 miles, crossing 2 time zones and landing in Singapore in the afternoon. During my layover in Singapore, I meet up with my former student Nick, who is vacationing in Asia, and we take a short 45-minute bus ride across the causeway, crossing the border into the country of Malaysia. We just arrived in Johor Bahru, Malaysia. We're in front of the Sultan Abu Bakar State Mosque. This was built between 1892 and 1900, and it really represents the diverse cultures and religions you'll see throughout Southeast Asia. Although Malaysia is a predominantly Muslim nation, there are also Buddhist and Hindu temples, all located in close proximity to one another, highlighting the ability of a nation to respect many religious beliefs. We head back to Singapore using its metro rail and venture out to find a restaurant called Song Fa, which is famous for serving Singapore's popular dish, bak kut teh, which is pork ribs and garlic in a delicious broth.
Keep it trying. That's so good.
We head back to the airport to board a United Airlines 787 plane for a long 15-hour, 8,000-mile flight, crossing 9 time zones and landing in San Francisco. After clearing immigration, we fly another 3 hours to Chicago, and finally we take our last 80-minute flight to Knoxville. So we made it back to our starting point here in the Great Smoky Mountains. We traveled over 22,000 miles from the Appalachians to the Himalayas. We saw how economics can extend beyond monetary measures, and we completed the trip in 80 hours. Thank you for joining me on this adventure, and I'll see you again next year.